So, quick reaction to the championship games. Two fucking crazy games of football there. Not super accurate in my predictions. Not awful, though. Starting with the Packers game. Yeah, I was real strong on the Packers there. I think part of the problem there, not to make excuses, was I kind of felt compelled because there was only two games to make sure they had, you know, but everything declared as a super strong bet. That's doesn't really excuse it, but looking back on it, I can definitely see how that was wrong. Um, but I really want to give credit to the Bucks, especially their defense. So something I've talked about with the Bucks for the last like 7 weeks, something like that, is that they run the stupidest, worst defensive scheme given the talent that they have available in the NFL. And they started to fix it last week, and I didn't trust it. I talked about it in the preview video that like if they do this, then my feelings on the game would change. But given the sample size, it didn't seem like they were going to, and they did it. They stopped playing a bunch of soft zone. They played man, and they hyper loaded on Devontae Adams. Now, if you watch the film, and I haven't done like completely it or anything, but it clearly was on just the broadcast that he was still open a lot. But the Packers ran into the stuff with the other guys that I was going to talk about, where even though MVS put up a lot of production, it wasn't necessarily meaningful in terms of scoring a lot of points. And there are other guys, be it Lazard, he had the one long touchdown, but other than that, he wasn't super useful. And a lot of all their production, especially MVS, was created by Aaron Rodgers, which is hey, good for him and everything. It's just Buccaneers were way smarter than I expected them to be defensively, and they didn't go completely to what they did when they played the Packers the first time, but it was a lot like that. Now there was some kind of stupid stuff in this game. Obviously, I would still probably argue it was a more or less equal game. The sequences right before and after half, if that shit happens in a game, there ain't much you can do if you have the other side of it. I mean, that touchdown, wow, holy shit! And actually, I want to bring that kind of brings me to the Packers' defensive ideas too. They really, I think, just misunderstood what let them be good in that game. Like now, what I'm gonna say is like harder than it sounds for sure. But the fact that they kept letting Kevin King get matched up on Mike Evans is a disaster. I talked about in the preview for that game so because functionally, right, they did what what like a lot of like surface level analysis would tell you, which is like, oh, Mike Evans big receiver, Kevin King big corner, makes sense. That's what you want matched up. Well, that's not the case, like even a little bit. I talked about how that is the one matchup actually that Mike Evans like kills ruthlessly is when he's matched up against a press corner who's basically not Jalen Ramsey. Like there's a couple other ones who could do it. Patrick Peterson when he was younger, that type of thing. But if you throw these like bigger press corners against Mike Evans, he's just gonna throw them off of him and go for fucking 50-yard touchdowns. And that's what he did in this game. So the Packers just allowing that to happen with like some level of consistency, which you saw in that game, is just that's inexcusable. Really, really, really bad. Um, and then I mean the Scotty Miller thing. Hey, whatever. I haven't seen exactly what happened on that play, like the full all 22 or anything, but yikes. He definitely reminds you of the fucking Raiders Jets from earlier from earlier in the season. Yeah, no, the Packers I think just defensively really misunderstood how the Bucks succeeded on offense. I mean, despite yeah, listen, I don't have a lot of specific thoughts on what they necessarily should have done outside of the Kevin King thing, without going through the game fully. But that was really a problem. Um, as far as predictions go, though, I don't feel that bad about it. I mean, the Packers they had a ton of time possession in that game. They didn't struggle to move the ball all that much, so they had some really notable 3-and-outs after the three Tom Brady picks, of course, or two of the three Tom Brady picks for sure. But other than that, they actually were doing just fine with a lot of the ways I talked about. They're really smart about using like Mercedes Lewis or Robert Tunyon, stuff like that, to move the ball down the field. But when you go through that thing right before half, and then of course the bane of my existence, goddamn rushing fumbles. I'm gonna go through in the offseason when I do all my team reviews, and I'm gonna count up the number of rush. I bet you like rushing fumbles in my favor because that's just a random thing. You can't predict that at all. But rushing fumbles in my favor versus versus not. I bet you I'm under 20%, almost certainly. But whatever excuses. Um, yeah, when you go through that right before half, and then right after half, where you just get a dumbass rushing fumble that gets basically returned for a touchdown. I mean, that really puts everything. Because yeah, and despite those things happening, like I said, the Packers really still absolutely had a chance to win this game. So I'll give my thoughts on the field goal at the end of the game too. I actually don't think that was like so ungodly awful. I do think it's bad, but and my first reaction was a lot. That was a lot where I think was what a lot of people's was basically what the fuck are they doing? But the idea there, right, is that either way, no matter what happens, you have to stop Tom Brady once. So like he's gonna get the ball with with like 2 minutes left and all timeouts, and all he has to do is kick a field. You know what I mean? Like which which if you told me that, that's really the same thing as telling me, okay, you have to stop him and get the ball back. Now, one of those is a little bit worse, getting the ball back, because of course then you're dealing with a lot more clock stuff. But I don't actually like think it's just the worst thing that's ever happened. I wouldn't have done it for sure, but yeah, that's kind of how I feel about that. Yeah. So then for the second game, the Bucks or sorry the Chiefs Bills, and that one went a whole lot closer than what I was talking about. I was real strong that the Chiefs were gonna pretty comfortably win the game, and I mean that's what happened. And really, it's what I talked about. It's that well theoretically, right, the Bills and this like soft stuff is like, oh, you limit Mahomes' big plays and blah blah blah. That just doesn't functionally work. It sounds good in theory, but the problem you run into, which is what happened in that game, is what I talked about in the previews, is that Mahomes he's fine with that. He's not like Josh Allen on the other side of his ball where he'll get kind of antsy and be like, fuck this, I'm trying to score right now. Allen's actually not so bad at this point in his career, but just kind of as an example, Mahomes he doesn't care. He'll let everything come to him, and that's really what happened here. Whatever Travis Kelsey, 15 catches, something like that. Um, and then the other thing was, yeah, with the Tyreek Hill stuff, no matter how good Tre'Davious White is, you saw him the first whatever offensive series, and there was a drop that if you, no matter how good you are, technique, skill wise, if you're just asked to run with Tyreek Hill 50 yards across the field, it's not going to work. And that showed up a lot of the time in this game. Yeah, and I don't know how much there else is there to say. I think the Bills are for real. I don't really have any doubts about them going forward. I don't think they're in nearly the same situation as some people are going to throw out like the Jags in 2017. That one's close to home, or some of these other teams that make one championship game and then fade out because mostly because Stephon Diggs is just so good, and with as long as they don't majorly fuck up their offensive roster, they're just too good to not succeed consistently. Even if Dable leaves the offensive coordinator. So I'm not worried about the Bills long term or anything like that. But yeah, no, that's what I was talking about with the Chiefs. They're just too good to. If you ask them to beat you 10 times in a row, they just will, and they won't really think twice about it. And that's what happened. So not a ton of crazy stuff. I was just wrong to feel so strongly about the Packers in the first one. I think is my main takeaway as far as my betting goes. But yeah, Bucks Chiefs Super Bowl. That's really gonna be interesting. My first thought. So these two teams played early in the season too. Is going to be the Chiefs, but obviously I'm going to do a whole breakdown and everything. Got a lot of time to look into that, but for now I think yeah, that's where I'll leave my thoughts.